Namaskar. The 1857 Revolt and its Historiography. The Revolt of 1857 was born out of various features ranging from the British policy of conquest and expansion to the colonial exploitation of India. Geographically speaking, it affected northwestern, north, and central India. The Sepoy Mutiny, as it was labeled initially by the colonial official writings, focused on the mutiny theme. To colonial officials and writers, it was the handiwork of a set of discontented Sipahis who were unhappy with the introduction in 1857 of the new Enfield rifle with its distinct ammunition, which required the bullet to be beaten before loading. Rumors that the grease used on the bullets was either from the fat of or cattle or pigs had symbolic implications. Thus, whereas cows were considered sacred by the Hindus, the Muslims considered pigs to be polluting. This created a strong animosity and was located as an attack on Hindu and Muslim religious beliefs. As can be expected, this understanding gave primacy to the religious factor and reinforced a line of the thinking which saw the revolt as a Muslim conspiracy that gained acceptance among contemporary officials. Sayyid Ahmad Khan from 1870 to 1819 wrote a tract, Asbab-e-Bagawat-e-Hind, the causes of the Indian revolt, to counter this allegation, where he sought to examine the underlying features that determined the nature of 1857 and sorry, sorry, taken together, this seems to be the basis for formulations like the clash of civilizations, echoes of which are here even today. In the in the in the post 9/11 context, contemporary writings in the mid 19th century generated political hysteria and racism, which legitimized the barbaric image of the Indian. Nevertheless, the 1857 revolt demonstrated the way English opinion itself was divided from the chartists like Ernest Jones hailed the revolt and unmasked the colonial exploitation of India, the revolt of Hindustan, or the New World, London, 1857. Of course, the most serious dissenting voice that was that of Karl Marx, who linked the colonial exploitation of India to the anger that was displayed by the people during the revolt. Marx and Engels held the unity displayed by the different religious communities who opposed British colonialism. Marx and Engels, The First War of Independence, 1857 to 1859, Moscow, 1975. Interestingly, the Indian National Congress, after its formation in 1885, actually denounced the 1857 revolt, given the social background of most of the leaders who were pro-British in their thinking. However, by the end of the 19th century, the revolt attracted and inspired the first generation of the Indian nationalists. Thus, V.D. Savarkar, who was perhaps the first Indian to write about the revolt in 1909, called it the Indian War of Independence of 1857. His pro-nationalist stance made Savarkar reject the colonial assertion that linked the revolt with the greased cartridges. As he put it, if this had been the issue, it would be difficult to explain how it could attract Nana Sahib, the Emperor of Delhi, the Queen of Jhansi, and Khan Bahadur Khan to join it. Besides, he also focused on the fact that the revolt continued even after the English Governor-General had issued a proclamation to withdraw the offending greased bullets. Savarkar went ahead and connected the revolt to the atrocities committed by the British. At the same time, the importance he gave to religion illustrates the sorry. At the same time, the importance he gave to religion illustrates the influence of the imperialist writers on him. From the 1920s, efforts were made to analyze the revolt from a Marxist position by pioneers like M.N. Roy in collaboration with Bani Mukherjee. India in Transition, 1922, and Rajni Palmdutt, India Today, 1942. Roy was rather dismissive about 1857 and saw in it its failure, the shattering of the last vestiges of feudal power. He was emphatic about The Revolution of 1857 being a struggle between the worn-out feudal system and the newly introduced commercial capitalism that aimed to achieve political supremacy. In contrast, Palm that saw 1857 as a major peasant revolt, though even though it had been led by the decaying feudal forces fighting to get back their privileges and turn back the tide of foreign domination. Consequently, one witnesses the beginning of a process that interrogated and critiqued the internal feudal order even while lauding the popular basis of the revolt. The access to sources after the independence of India show interesting developments related to the studies on the 1857 revolt. What developed was a rather sophisticated nationalist historiography that harped on the complexities of the revolt. It included nationalist historians like R.C. Majumdar, S.P. Chaudhary, S.N. Sen, and K.K. Datta. R.C. Majumdar, The Sepoy Mutiny and the Revolt of 1857, 1957. S.P. Chaudhary, Civil Revolt in Indian Mutinies, 1857 to 1859, 1957. The Theories of the Indian Mutiny, 1965. S.N. Sen, 1857, 1957. Sorry. Essence 1857, 1957 KK Datta Reflections on the Mutiny in 1967. These historians were not uniformly comfortable with the idea that the 1857 revolt was the first war of Indian independence. Moreover, they referred to ideas like nationalism that were supposedly witnessed during the 1857 or show the very inception of the nationalist movement contained in the revolt. Nevertheless, they went very clearly beyond the simple categorization that had seen two dominant and opposing narratives, lauding the British, the victors who had won the war, and the claims of the rebellious Indians who had been defeated. This meant a shift in focus, with efforts being made to locate the internal contradictions. The Indian rich, which included the Morelanders and Buniyas, and the popular basis of 1857, and not concentrate merely on the influential classes which had been the focus of contemporary British officials. It is here that nationalist historiography worked on and developed the legacy of the Marxists, even as some nationalist historians inscribed their disapproval of seeing it as the first war of independence. In this sense, it at last the nationalist historians recorded a space so howsoever limited to the popular basis of the revolt. Since peasants do not write their histories, they did not document their interaction with the 1857 revolt. But is it possible to ignore the folklore and traditions of resistance associated with the 1857 revolt? Moreover, can one afford to ignore the connections between 1857 and the peasant revolts of the preceding page, or those outside the northern region of India? One can, for example, refer here to the revolts of the Wheels in 1852 in Khandesh, Dhar in Malwa, the Santals in 1855 to 1856 in Rajmahal, Bhagalpur, Birbhum, and Birbhum, the Mapilaj over the 1836 to 1854 period in Malabar, the Kandhaj in Ghumshar and Bodh, 1855 to 1816, the Savras of Parlia Khemedi, 1856 to 1857, or for the Indigo Revolt in Bengal that began in 1859 and was directed against white planters, in spite of being told repeatedly about the role of the permanent settlement and the Bhadraloks that supposedly left Bengal as a zone of peace in this phase. Unless one locates historical processes in a narrow factual manner, it would be indeed almost impossible to assume that peasants cannot think or incorporate components from the past while struggling against colonial rule as well as their immediate oppressors. In this sense, at least, it is difficult to study the revolt unless one takes into account the social history of peasant protests prior to 1857 and in the phase after it. This would show the peasants in a bitter anti-imperialist political struggle where the internal exploiter in the form of the Sahukar or Bunia was not spared. It would also undermine a point that has almost got frozen as as common sense. that the impact of the 1857 revolt was not felt outside the Indo-Gangetic plain. With the passage of the time, the development of other historical approaches generated a lot of debates on the nature of 1857 among historians. The first exhaustive work on the revolt was published in 1957 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the event, edited by P.C. Joshi, 1857, a symposium, 1957. It focused on both the diversities and the specificities of the 1857 revolt. This included assessing 1857 against the colonial backdrop, examining aspects of participation, and focusing in a major way on the internal contradictions. This volume also sought to highlight dimensions of popular culture by incorporating folk poems that have survived. One has in mind here the contributions especially of P.C. Joshi and Talmij Khaldun. In many ways, this work inspired a serious spell of writings on the revolt. Here, mention must be made of Eric Stokes, who examined issues ranging from the way the nature of 1857 was conditioned by the background, the demographic and ecological features to the social composition and the role of peasants, especially the rich peasants. Peasant and the Raj, studies in peasant society and agrarian revolt in colonial India, 1978, and his The Peasant Armed, the Indian Revolt of 1857-1986. Interestingly, his research guided Stokes to reassess his position. Thus, whereas in his first work he had focused on the rich peasant leadership and mobilization in peasant armed, Stokes enlarged the social basis of peasant participation in the revolt. However, it was left to historians like Rudrangshu Mukherjee in the Awadh Revolt 1857 to 1858, a study of popular resistance 1984, and Tapti Roy, the politics of a popular uprising. Bundelkhand in 1857, 1997, 1994 to enrich our understanding of the revolt by their focus on the popular level of the revolt. Their effort was based on specific area studies, Awadh and Bundelkhand, that brought to light fascinating complexities of popular militancy that had remained ignored alongside historians like Iqtidar Alam Khan have studied questions related to organization. The Gwalior contingent in 1857 to 1858, study of organization and ideology of the Sepoy rebels. Social Scientists, January-April 1998, pages from 53 to 75. Hereafter, sorry, Gautam Bhadra and Saeed Zahir Hussain Jafri have focused on the middle level leadership. Four level rebels of 1857 in Ranjit Guha edition, Subaltern Studies for 1985, pages from 229 to 75, and profile of a saintly rebel, Maulvi Ahmadullah Shahin, sorry, Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah. Scholars like Khaldun in P.C. Joshi, pages from 1 to 70, and E.I. Brodkin, The Struggle for Succession, Rebels and Loyalists in the Indian Mutiny of 1857 in Modern Asian Studies, 1972, pages from 277 to 1990, have focused on activities in the areas where British authority had been subverted, and if 1857 was indeed a restorative revolt. More recently, since the 1990s, historians have focused on the popular dimensions of 1857. Here one can refer to scholars like S. Singh, who have highlighted the participation of Adivasis, the tribes in the 1857 uprising, pages 76 to 18 and pages 76 to 85. Badri Narayan, who has focused on law and outcasts and popular culture, Dalits and Memories of 1857, ICHI Conference Proceedings, December 2006, unpublished, and Popular Culture in 1857, Memory Against Forgetting, pages 1880, pages 86 to from 86 to 94, and Ajat Ray, who has studied the mentalities of 1857, the French community commonality and mentality before the emergence of Indian nationalism. 2003, pages from 353 to 534. Moreover, working within the paradigms of cultural studies, scholars like Jenny Sharpe Allegories of Empire, the figure of women in the colonial text 1993, and Nancy Paxton writing under the Raj, gender, race and rape in the British colonial imagination from 1830 to 1947, 1999 have delineated the way the theme of the rape of white women that was virtually created to fill racism, which emerged as a major fallout of the revolt. What needs to be emphasized is that the 1857 revolt represents possibly one of the most powerful dramatic anti-colonial movements which united the peasant and the landed sections against the ruthless imperialist onslaught over the first half of the 19th century. At the same time, it also questioned the internal exploiters like the moneylenders and bonias. What has been delineated What has been delineated illustrates the evolution of the historiography on the 1857 revolt. As seen, historians have shifted their focus from the mutinous reservoirs and seeing it in the origins of Indian nationalism to studying the diversities of the revolt, both in terms of popular participation and regions affected by it, as also highlighting the internal contradictions. Presently, some historians are engaged in research, researching gender-related issues, which would undoubtedly enrich our understanding of the revolt of 1857. धन्यवाद. Thank you so much.